So there's been big news from the UK Foundation Year Programme recently, and that was the decision to move the Specialised Foundation Year Programme to a Preference Informed Allocation system away from academic rankings. And this is in line with the changes to the main Foundation Year Programme last year. I know there's been a lot of different responses to this, so to make sense of it all, in this video we'll talk about what changes have been made, the pluses and minuses, and I'll be ending the video with some advice and some words of encouragement. Let's start with what changes were made to the regular Foundation Year Programme, because I know not everyone will be familiar with this. Once you graduate from medical school in the UK, new graduates need to enter the Foundation Year Programme, which is a 2-year scheme where you rotate between 6 clinical jobs and you put into practice everything that you've learned and you learn on the job as well. There's an organisation creatively called the UK Foundation Programme Office, whose role is to assign all the newbie doctors to different Foundation Year posts across the country. And their job is to maintain that standards are maintained and everyone gets a good level of training across the country. Medical students in their final years rank which deaneries they want to apply to, and in that deanery, which set of 6 jobs they want to apply to. This is done online, and within the set of jobs they include a variety of specialties, so usually something acute, something surgical, and also something based in the community, so this is often general practice or sometimes psychiatry. Some areas are more popular than others, namely London and the surrounding areas always receive a high volume of applications. However, the UK FPO needs to ensure that all the posts are filled across the country, because although most people prefer to go to like an urban centre instead of somewhere rural, even patients living in more rural areas are deserving of high quality care, so they need to make sure that they have enough foundation year doctors in that hospital. So there needs to be some way of ranking all the medical graduates and putting them in some order in which they can choose where they want to work. Now follow along here, because here's where I'm going to give you the timeline of what's actually happened. So previously the rankings for the order of allocation was based on 3 performance metrics. These were an educational performance measure, or EPM, an educational achievement score, or EA, and the situational judgment test, or SJT. The EPM was basically an academic score from your medical school, so these would take into account all your exam performances across medical school, and they'd rank all the students in order of deciles. So if you were in the top 10%, you basically scored the maximum number of points for the EPM, and that was ranked out of 43. For the educational achievement score, you got a total of 7 points. 5 points was for any additional degrees. So if you did a degree before studying medicine or did an integrated degree or a master's, you got points for that. And you got 2 points for any PubMed cited articles, I think. And finally, the SJT was a 2.5-hour exam where you basically had to look through ethical dilemmas and then rank, like in multiple choice, which actions were more appropriate than others. So it was kind of like the situational judgment section of the UCAT exam, which was for medical school admission, but obviously a bit harder because it's for final year medical students. For this one exam, you got 50 points. So i.e. half of your total point allocations for the rankings was based on just this exam, which is crazy. All the students were given a score out of 100, and those who scored the highest number of points got first dibs on which deaneries they got to pick for their jobs. There was a small change in the middle where they scrapped the educational achievement score, so i.e. the extra degrees and the publications, and that was just merged into the EPM. However, the big change came last year. The UK FPO in January 23 conducted a survey, as there were growing concerns that the allocation system at the time was increasingly unfair and also stressful. The survey received over 14,000 responses, 80% odd were medical students, and they found that 2/3 of people were in favour of moving an allocation system to a Preference Informed Allocation, or PIA. This basically means that a computer randomly assigns your ranking and gives you a number, and then based on the preferences that you put when you're applying in your final year of medical school, an algorithm works down the rankings, which have been randomly assigned, matching everyone to their first choice deanery. If your deanery was already fully subscribed, then you'd be skipped, and then the rest of the people would be allocated to their first choice. And then in a second round, the algorithm would try and get your next preferred deanery. And importantly, in the system, the scores for the EPM and the SJT were scrapped. So the only thing which actually determines your ranking was the computer-generated rank. And the only other condition is that you pass the UK medical licensing assessment, which was a two-part exam, basically the same as what medical school finals already are, but it's a written assessment and also practical skills, so OSCEs. This new UK MLA was supposed to be one way of standardizing like the licensing assessment across the whole of the UK, as all medical schools would have to sit this new exam. The evidence in favor of the PIA system is that, according to some modelling data, more people under this new system would get their first choice job compared to the old system with EPM and SJT. This was done by a study by a group at Imperial College. There was also growing concerns that the SJT was an unfair exam, and in particular that it was racist and it selected against people from certain backgrounds or factors outside of their control. So this is the situation we find ourselves today. I'm recording on February the 29th, 2024. This is the first year of the PIA system, and in fact, in early March, the final years are supposed to find out what their job allocations are, so that'll be an interesting one to follow up and see what has resulted from this system. So let's discuss the pros and cons. So the advantages of the new PIA system is that more people, in theory, should be getting their first choice jobs, which is what the modelling data suggests. And it's supposed to be a fairer system, so we talked about the discriminatory SJT exam. To be honest, I'm kind of glad they got rid of that, because one exam counting for 50% of your final score, I think, is a bit too much. But they also decided to get rid of the decile system, so the EPM measure, because there were growing concerns that this was not quite standardized across all the medical schools, and there were some students saying that it's harder to get in the high deciles if you're at a high ranking school compared to other schools, but obviously this is a bit of a barbed wire topic. And it's important to note that the UK MLA, although it is a summative exam, it's just a pass-fail assessment. They're not intending to use that for future rankings. And thirdly, it makes the allocation process less stressful, and it's supposed to prevent toxic competition between students. This makes sense because if you're no longer in competition for other students for your rankings, then I guess that should stop any kind of maladaptive competitive behavior. And to be fair, sometimes like with the previous system where your scores didn't matter, you had people kind of not helping each other out and even skipping on their clinical placements to spend more time in the library studying for exams, which could hinder their ability to develop some clinical skills which would be important for them to be a safe doctor. So getting rid of the scoring system might stop this. On the flip side, there are some disadvantages. Firstly, we do not actually know if the PIA system will indeed result in more people getting their first choice jobs. This is because it's been modeled from old data, and we cannot predict how people's preference assigning behavior will change under the new system. For example, if everyone suddenly decides that they want to apply to London because they know that getting to London is not really dependent on getting high SJT or EPM, and it's just due to like chance, then we might have a situation where actually less people are getting their first choice foundation schools. There's quite a lot of unknowns here, so it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen in like a few weeks and then in the years to come. And secondly, the new system might disincentivize people. Now, you could argue that it won't affect student motivation because we're all like equally passionate to becoming the best doctor we can, so of course we're going to be working really hard towards our exams and the UK MLA. But in reality, I think we all intuitively know that if you move something where every mark could count towards your final ranking, something that's more of a pass-fail system, then intuitively, we're probably not going to try to expand our knowledge as much as we can to try pick up those harder marks in exams. And although this extra knowledge may not be necessary to be a safe FY1 doctor, if you do have a broader base of knowledge, you will more likely to be a good physician so long as you match that with the appropriate clinical skills as well, because you better be able to navigate like challenging cases. But I think this also ties into an issue of fairness. The new system gives you rankings based on a computer randomized process, and this computer assigned ranking not only applies to the allocation of deaneries but also jobs within that deanery, so the order's not reversed at any point to try even it out. And really, is that more fair than a meritocratic system? I mean, there are winners and losers in any system, but obviously people who have been working really hard over like 4 or 5 years of medical school to try push for the highest deciles, maybe sacrificing in other areas of life for this, have missed out compared to people who maybe just put enough work in to pass the exams. And obviously there were concerns that the SAT was an unfair exam. It is surprising that they got rid of the EPM because, theoretically this is a system, a decile system, which is averaged over quite a number of years of performance. So there's quite a few data points. So you could argue this is kind of a fair measure of someone's attainment, and if someone's achieving well, then they should be rewarded for that achievement. These changes were intended to reduce stress, but actually I've seen the opposite happen in my year group, and for context, I'm in the penultimate year of medical school. I know some people who've been devastated by the changes because they've been working really hard for the last 4 or 5 years of medical school to ensure they have a competitive EPM score, so then they can potentially have more agency in whether they can apply and work in London and live with their parents and save on rent costs. So these do have like social and financial implications too. Obviously, in the previous system, you were not guaranteed to get whatever job you wanted, even if you worked hard. It does remove a sense of agency and a level of control in that system. Thankfully, this is not a huge stressor for me because I'm not from London myself. What is stressful is kind of how the system kind of keeps sort of changing at short notice, and we're constantly having to adapt. I mean, if you compare the system to when I started medical school to how it is now, it's considerably different. And I think it's only fair to change the rules of the game, so to speak, before someone actually starts playing that game or entering the system, rather than changing it midway through, because I think it does affect how someone may choose to spend their time during their medical school career. So the UK FPO have acknowledged that this is unfortunate, but they have said that because they genuinely think that the PIA system is more fair, less discriminatory, then it'd be inappropriate to delay rolling that system out. And it could be argued that this is actually what the majority of students want, so of course it's fair. 66% are saying that they want the new PIA system. But I think it's important to bear in mind that statistically, most people in their medical school won't actually be in the top few deciles. So I guess the PIA system does make sense in that more people may feel like they're more likely to get their first choice jobs, even though we still don't know what's actually going to happen this year. So we gotta be watching and asking the final year students what's happening to their allocations. Okay, so let's talk about the SFP, because this is where the recent changes have happened. So the Specialised Foundation Programme was previously called the Academic Foundation Programme, or AFP. This is a slightly different path you can take your foundation years. So instead of rotating across 6 clinical jobs, you have 5 clinical jobs. In that one block, you get protected time to do one of 3 things. There's like the academic stream, so you do research, like projects and like other things, writing up papers, I guess. Teaching, so designing curriculum, teaching medical students, other doctors, and you can even get like a PG cert out of it, like which is a teaching diploma essentially. And there's like the leadership and quality improvement stream, where you do like quality improvement projects and audits and things like that. So the SFP allocation process was fundamentally different from regular foundation year program in that it was processed by the foundation schools themselves, so you weren't like nationally assigned. So you had to choose between like 2 deaneries which were offering SFP programs across the country. There are a pretty limited number of posts. I think there's about 500 posts and about 2,000 people applying. So it was an inherently competitive process. You weren't guaranteed an SFP place just because you put your name down for it. And each deanery would process their own applications, so they'd often look at how many publications someone has, they might interview them, they might look at any advisors they've had at medical school for exam performance. The purpose of this selection criteria is to try select the most appropriate people for that program who'd make the most out of that protected time to do like research and other things. And this pathway was particularly recommended for people who are looking for careers in clinical academia. And around the time when the changes were happening to the main foundation year program, people were wondering if the SFP were also going to change. For the application cycle just gone, so UK FP 2024, there was no changes to the SFP. And this kind of meant that the SFP was the only way people could control where they ended up. Anecdotally, I've heard of quite a lot of people in the year above applying to the SFP, not necessarily because they wanted a career in clinical academia or they're super interested in the SFP program, but because they knew if as long as they cleared the interviews, things, and got the SFP post, then they could kind of choose which deanery they were going to. Obviously, this is no guarantee, and it's extremely competitive in some places, particularly like London. I think they have competition ratio of 6-1, and you do need decent portfolio already of publications, posters, and things like that. There were concerns that there'd be a huge upsurge in people applying to the SFP for this reason. And there were some rumors that, they'd change the system so you apply for the SFP during your F1 year, because usually anyway that protected block for research and other things came in your F2 year, to try circumvent people trying to game the system just so you could choose based on their SFP allocation. However, the UK FPO were explicitly asked this in their webinar last year, and they clearly said that they were not intending for changes to the SFP, because the academic selection criteria was a very important way of filtering and selecting the best candidates for the SFP program. And that all changed about 2 weeks ago, where they said the SFP would also move to the PIA allocation system, just like the regular foundation year program. And this decision was made because there were concerns that there was not equitable access to resources to prepare for the competitive SFP selection and interview process. For example, people might not have had access locally to like coaching, interview coaching, or research opportunities, or a variety of factors like cost or personal responsibilities like caring and location. So the purpose was to widen access to the program for people who would not have previously had opportunity to develop like their research and leadership skills in a program like this. So the reaction to the changes to the SFP have been a lot more negative than to the main foundation year program. All major stakeholders, so medical students, the medical schools, and the BMA have voiced their concerns. The main concerns is like the SFP is already a competitive program which demands certain skills. And if there are no way of filtering between a large volume of applications, then you're less likely to be able to pick the candidates who are most suitable for a program like that. So you're undermining the purpose of that program in the first place. And it also undermines the people who are really committed for a career in clinical academia, rather than people who just want to try it out for a first time. It was also a little bit concerning because apparently the UK FPO told the BMA that any changes to the SFP would only be made in 2026 at the earliest, but now it's been changed for people entering in 2025, which is yours truly cohort. And it's also clear that they did nowhere near the same level of stakeholder engagement like surveys compared to the changes to the regular foundation year program. Another issue is that it might disincentivize people to undertake extra research in their own time. One of the main criteria the SFP used to use to distinguish between people, particularly in places like London. And although it might get rid of the rather silly practice of just getting involved in research and trying to get your name on publications for the sake of it, I think it is important to have some idea of what research might be about before entering a program like the SFP, because I think research in medical school is over glamorized and put on a pedestal, whereas for a lot of people it's actually not what they first expected it to be and not really for them. I know some of my peers who have been working relentlessly on research projects, every summer and getting involved in multiple things outside of their normal academics. I think it's a real shame that their hard work over all the years is not going to be acknowledged either in the main foundation program or the SFP, and I really think it should be. And fundamentally, I think instead of reducing the threshold for entry to the SFP to widen access, I think we should actually be giving more support to people who might not have had the opportunities to get exposure to research projects and, support these people, whether financially or through mentorship and things, to be able to excel even in the competitive SFP selection and interview process. Okay, so how should we respond to this change as students, particularly if we're interested in clinical research and we're still interested in the SFP program? Well, I think it still makes sense to keep doing what we're doing, keep engaging in extra research and working hard in our studies for those academic prizes. This is because although these criteria no longer count for the SFP, they very much do count for specialty training posts, which start happening just a few years after your foundation training. So things like teaching, publication, quality improvement projects, prizes, these things all count. So if we can get started on building up the portfolio now, it's only going to give us a head start when we're applying for those things a few years down the line. I wanted to end this video with some words of encouragement. It seems like everywhere we look in the NHS, the outlook is bleak. And it's not just the ongoing strikes, the media, or the public perception. Even for us as the future doctors of Britain, even for us when we're going to these hospital placements, we're going out to GP placements, we're talking to the doctors who are on the front line, the majority of them are really quite negative, even if they are passionate about their subject and their job. There's so many comments about people doubting the sustainability of the NHS and the longevity for those who are already working on the front line. And this is pretty concerning, and it's influencing medical student attitudes hugely. So much so that a large proportion of medical students actually do not intend on working in the NHS and may leave medicine altogether. And I think this is so sad, particularly as most of us have gone into medicine because this is a subject we're passionate about and we really want to help people. And my encouragement to you is not to simply say oh, the foundation years are only 2 years of your life and wherever you go you'll have a great time. Although that's true, that's essentially saying just get on with it and just suck it up. But no, I have something a lot better to share. It comes from my faith in Jesus Christ. We have a promise so much more assuring to hold on to, and it's from the book of Romans. And it says, "We know all things work for good for for those who love the Lord, who are called according to his purpose. Isn't that such great news? We have a God who loves us so much, who is working in situations to bring about his ultimate plans in our life and for our good. That's not to say everything will be easy and we'll just easily get our first choice foundation year programs and live happily ever after. However, whatever happens, whatever the state of the NHS is by the time we start working, there is a God who loves us deeply and who is going to be with us every step of the way and is going to be helping us encounter any challenges that we face. So I hope this was an encouraging note to end on, and if it was for you in particular, why don't you drop the comment Amen in the comments below so we can also encourage each other. So anyway, thanks for sticking to the end of the video. I tried to give a full picture and some balanced arguments, but of course I know there'll be some disagreements between people, so try be nice in the comments below. Please give this video a like and consider subscribing to the channel, as I'm thinking about making more content specifically for medical students. But anyway, take care and bye for now.